Boom. Howdy, fam. Anthony Johnson here today, co-founder of the Breadman Group, founder of 21 Studios, 21 Convention, 21 Summit, 21 University, 22 Convention, the Patriarch Convention, 10,000 other things on the internet. Here, the special Friday edition, Friday episode, Good Friday, right? Not literally, but figuratively, I guess. Episode 168 of the Redman Group, Patriarchy is Inevitable. Today, we're talking about masculinity, femininity, Christianity, controversy in Christian denominations like patriarchy, pro-patriarchy, anti-patriarchy, issues like that. And I'm talking about making women holy again. If you guys can see that, it's one of my favorite new hats I got made a couple months ago. And also, we're talking about a book, if you guys can see it, I'll show again in a minute, called It's Good to Be a Man, from co-author, Pastor Michael Foster, one of today's guests, along with another Christian pastor having on for the first time, Pastor Brian Sauvé, allegedly the 8th Irish cousin of the infamous Rico Sauve. We're going to find out and investigate that situation. Before we get into today's show, quick shout out from our sponsor, our own event, the Patriarch Convention, formerly known as the 21 Convention Patriarch Edition. Special upcoming event in Orlando, Florida. It's going on for its 4th year in a row. This October 14th to 17th, 2022. Come on down. You can see Michael Foster, Pastor Michael Foster on the left here, Elliot Hulse on the right, many other speakers in the background. It's a 4-day event, Friday through Monday. It's amazing. If you want to be an apex alpha male patriarch, lead your family with honor, conviction, integrity, and badass, powerful masculinity. It's an amazing event. It's part of the larger 21 Summit that has 2 other events going on. So this one's for fathers and husbands, men who are focused on that domain of life and that kind of spectrum of life as a man. We also have events for men who are more like single, younger, bachelors, but any man of any age is welcome over 18. And we have women's event too, called the 22 Convention. You can see Elliot Hulse and his amazing wife, Colleen Hulse, right here, pictured at last year's event in October. So come on down to the event. Your future is patriarchy. Have a great time. You can bring a friend free, or a son, or a brother, whatever you want. And Patriarch attendees get access to the 21 Convention as well, speeches to it, complimentary with your ticket. Come on down, save $1,000, and get your ticket now. You can get tickets at the link in the description, or visit 21studios.com. Now, without further ado, your future is patriarchy. Please let me welcome to the show Mr. Michael Foster and Pastor Brian Sauve. I think I'm saying that right.
Close enough.
Oh, cool.
Hey, Anthony, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Glad you guys had you guys on today. I appreciate the special Friday scheduling. Usually we do on Saturdays, but who cares? Friday is close enough. So I appreciate you guys coming on. And Michael, thank you for introducing me to Brian as well. I was looking for more kind of wingmen for you, so you weren't solo as a Christian pastor. There's Reverend Peterson as well, but I know you guys don't line up on all the issues. And you guys are much tighter on the issues, as I understand it. So I'm excited to dig into that and look into it.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Anthony. Appreciate it.
So first up, I'm looking forward to meeting you, man. We've only talked once on the phone, but I'll meet you in a few months in Orlando.
Yeah, looking forward to that too.
So first things first, I wanted to bring up a religious article that came out about maybe a month ago, not even, from churchleaders.com. And it wasn't too much. It's not like a normal hit piece against our events like I'm used to. It's pretty fair, I think. Michael, you commented about that as well on your Twitter.
Yeah.
But they discovered our event, and they were particularly triggered, I think, by the inclusion of Brian and yourself, Michael. So if you guys could kind of talk to me about this article and what your first response to it was when you saw it. I had never seen anything like this about our events. Usually it's just like feminist and mainstream media pieces. So I'm new to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, he reached out to me via the author here, Dale Chamberlain, I think his name is. He reached out to me for a comment. He wanted to know why I thought it was important that I be at this event. And I was like, I never said it was important for me to be at this event. First off, like that's kind of, there's something baked into the premise here. But I said, it's just an opportunity to preach the gospel to women, and speak truth to women, something like that. And I was curious if they were going to put my actual quote in there. What would they say? But when I went through all of it, for the most part, it was factual. And there's a little bit of spin in the middle of it, but I think I don't know what the goal is here. I mean, maybe see if we get some more traction. I don't know what his narrative goal was, really, because he doesn't seem to be pro patriarchy per se.
Yeah.
Looking at some of his other stuff, but he also, it was mostly honest, and maybe people are recognizing that this is just a good conversation to have. It's good for clicks, good to get it out there,
Yeah.
and then also that I would use my influence to beat up on them if they lied and get the truth out there, which is true. I would have done that. So.
And this is a pretty big website. I think on Facebook they have like 30,000 followers. I don't know how many on Twitter, but it had a pretty good. It's a website with a real fan base to it, at least seemingly. So, Brian, what did you think about this piece when it came out? And you've been through some media storm. We'll get to in a minute before, but
sure,
yeah, it was the first time for me seeing this kind of thing.
Yeah, that was it was almost the exact same play that I got the probably word for word same Twitter message from the author, and Michael and I compared notes probably within half an hour of both of us replying to him, and I think we said virtually the same thing without pre-planning. Like the way you phrased it is actually nothing that either of us have said, and then but here's why we're speaking here. Here's why we're glad to be there, and I was fairly shocked as that it was so factual and didn't have all that much spin beyond the headline. Obviously is pointing towards this. Hey, you remember this idiot that said this thing?
Yeah.
And everyone hated him for it. Well, that same idiot is speaking at this other dumb thing. So, but I was pretty surprised, and I do agree. I think once he got both of our messages back, he probably didn't expect us to answer. Number one, because it ran pretty soon after he messaged. Yeah. And I think he realized if I spin this too much, both of these guys are going to drag me. Yeah. And I'll have an unpleasant week. So
you got
pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Are there a bunch of websites this seems to be like a cross-denominational website that tracks pastors and priests and stuff, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't know this kind of thing existed. Are there other websites like this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so Christian leadership is a huge area where you can develop a lot of content that makes a lot of money. Basically, pastors that are trying to, you're dealing with cross-generational problems, family conflict, leadership development, all that stuff in a church organization. People don't just show up on Sunday and leave, actually. They show up with all their problems, and there's different people that want to be seen as an elder or a deacon, and maybe they're qualified, maybe they're not. So pastors really have to be general practitioners that know how to solve a lot of leadership issues. So there's a ton of books on it. Some of it is just taking more or less corporate America leadership tips and rebranding it for Christianity. It's not like the red pill where people just go in and you have these Twitter accounts that blow up every couple of months where they're like a real big deal. And we all know that content. We've seen it all before. They just cut and paste it, put like a new hashtag, a little bit of a spin on it that makes it their own kind of. Well, same thing with the Christian world. It's just the same, trendy book, trendy idea, but when you get down to it's the same stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of that out there.
Yeah. Now I wanted to also bring up, Michael, you've said to me that Brian's actually more hardcore than you, which tickles me pink because you're like, I consider you like ultra Christian, like ultra MAGA. But I didn't know. I think I saw something briefly about it when it happened, but Brian, you hit mainstream news big time. This hit Yahoo, it hit The Independent, it hit a lot of mainstream news sources. I wasn't aware of that when I invited you as a speaker. People think I'm like this mastermind, like looking for clout, and I don't even know half the time. I try to keep tabs on it, especially if someone's already spoken. But if they haven't, the internet's a big place with a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. So can you talk to me about when you hit, this was from just February this year, so a few months ago. What was this about? It's tweet, obviously, talking about women. I love it. Dear ladies is the tweet. There's no reason whatsoever for you to love yourself and low-cut shirts, bikinis, bras. They screwed up the tweet. I can't read it all. But anyway, I saw you comment on it later too, and like basically you're just giving ordinary advice to young Christian women or whatever from 100 years ago. Yeah. But today you say the same thing and people like freak out. So talk to me about this experience of going viral and what the content was about, the tweet.
Yeah, sure. So the basic premise of the tweet in the first place was me talking to people that actually are interested in following me, which are mainly Christian men and women interested in the recovery of the productive Christian household, being a godly man, godly woman, producing godly offspring, and that sort of thing. So I was really aiming in this tweet, and that whole week, really, I had scheduled out a bunch of stuff about just the commodification of female sexuality. And, a lot of women don't understand that they are the product on Instagram and Facebook, that Facebook and Instagram are leveraging to sell advertisement. They're not the client, they're the product.
Yeah.
And so, when you take the commodification of the female body and you treat yourself in that way, posting pictures of yourself scantily clad, whatever the situation, you are basically functioning as a even unwitting prostitute. You're saying, I will sell my sexual self for clicks so that Reebok can sell sneakers or whatever. And so I said a boringly Christian thing. And as often happens, every 3 to 6 months, usually it just stays in my circle of followers, but every once in a while, someone will give it the old hate retweet or write an article. And this time I was at a psalm sing at our church, and by 6 p.m. that day, like 3 hours later, it was number 9 trending on Twitter. And then other people were cussing me out, and it was number 2. And then for a couple days, it was number 1, or for 24 hours, when I think it was some sneaker company retweeted it with a bunch of boobs.
Wow.
And, women just started sending me nudes, sending me all sorts of pornography of themselves, which is, of course, the ultimate own on me to say, how dare you say be modest? Here, I'll send you pictures of myself naked.
Wow.
So basically, they really got me.
And you're married. You're married with like half a dozen kids or something?
Married, 5 kids, no interest. Those went to the delete folder. Luckily, Twitter is smart enough to censor media from people that when your messages are formatted the right way. So I didn't see most. I just saw the little, you have a message, and it was some scantily clad. Okay, well, done with that, But I think that the analytics on that tweet were pretty wild. It was like 50 million impressions by the time, 2 weeks later. And people were calling me from Canada, asking me to do interviews on their radio shows and stuff. So it was an interesting 24 hours. But at the end of the day, I was like, thank you.
I'm pulling up the tweet right now. Oh, totally. We had something similar a couple of years ago with Michael McGrady again. It does insane views and stuff. Yeah, the tweet's got 22,000 quote tweets.
Yeah.
In addition to over 1,100 retweets. It's huge. Yeah, and I wonder how many comments. Probably tens of thousands. That's crazy.
Yeah, you want to be careful in that comment section.
Yeah.
Not safe for work.
Yeah. Was that your first time going viral, like hitting mainstream media?
It was the first time going. I've been Christian viral before, but that was the first viral.
Yeah, we kind of had that recently with the Patriarch Convention, just promoting you two as speakers, and some of the images we made were pretty polarizing. Like in today's, I love making those, right? One of them, of Michael, yeah. Well, even with you though, we just did like a regular one for you, and even that made all these Christian feminists really angry. So the Patriarch Convention kind of went viral inside of it's what seemed to be Christian Twitter sphere. Mm-hmm. And I'm not that familiar with that stuff. You guys obviously are. Like I'm more like Manosphere Twitter and kind of political Twitter to some extent. But it's been really interesting to see all that go down. And what I realized is what I didn't understand about Christianity today, that it's significantly, like I already kind of knew this from talking to you, Michael, and just observing over the past couple of years and just observing American culture, first of all. But the anti-patriarchal presence in Christianity is huge. It's much bigger than I realized. At least it seems that way. And I didn't understand that. I thought it was more of like a blasé attitude towards it. And then you had some rabid feminists kind of stir stuff up, but it seems like it's more, it's a bigger problem than I even realized. And I already thought it was a big problem. Can you guys talk to me about the presence of anti-patriarchy in Christianity in America? Like, are anti-patriarchy Christians frauds?
So this is, what do we mean by the word patriarchy? That's part of it. I was watching,
Sure.
I don't know how I got on this, but I was watching some story about this crazy Mormon offshoot of the Mormon church. And this guy had like 83 wives and all these kids, and he sexually abused his daughter and made them all dress all terrible, and like handed them off in marriage without them ever even knowing the guy. They met the guy at the at the ceremony and all this stuff.
It's fundamentalist Mormon, it's called, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it
Yeah.
was at the height of it was like 25,000 people, and it's like down to 2,500. The leader of it is in jail, but still has control. He's on the FBI's most wanted list for all the sex crimes. And I was watching this and hearing this girl's story, and she was his daughter, and it didn't seem dramatically over the top. You know, you can usually tell when someone's like, it sounds like they're kind of, stretching this to make it more. But it seemed she was very anchored and matter of fact. And I was thinking, like, this is what a lot of people imagine when they hear the word patriarchy, something like this. And of course, that's not what we mean, not at all. What we mean is that father rule, the male rule, is intrinsic to God's design, as evident by everything. By there are no matriarchal societies that are more than like a couple decades there for a little bit. There's matrilineal, where you track your heritage through your mother, but there aren't any where women.
The Jews do that, right? A lot of them.
Absolutely. That's how I do it. But you don't track. The key leadership roles of influence are not held by women, at least the primary ones. And Stephen Goldberg wrote a book called The Inevitability of Patriarchy, which is where I got the first line from my book, It's Good to Be a Man, which was republished as Why Men Rule. And so that's a great book. And he's not a Christian. And Margaret Mead wrote an endorsement of that book. Margaret Mead is a feminist, hands down, and really the mother of anthropology, of modern anthropology. But she knew what he studied was right. And you look at this in corporate America. You can see who's in charge of companies, who's the chairman of the board. You can look at who's really making the decisions. It's still men. Now, I do think, legally speaking, we're not really living in a patriarchal society anymore, because the way laws have been done, it's more androgynous, it's more a mess, more confused. Women are given preeminence in certain domains where men aren't anymore. So that's true. But what I was saying in my book I wrote was that this is part of God's natural order. Men are called to be leaders. Women expect men to lead. Women expect men to perform. Women have different standards for men than they do for themselves. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, they need to have standards for themselves. That's the problem. When we start applying standards to women, suddenly you go viral. You know, I had a viral tweet that got me in USA Today. Rand Paul's political analyst was criticizing me. You know, it went everywhere, and it was wow. It was a lot like Brian's experience. You know, I didn't trend on Twitter, but I had a lot of conservatives coming out after me because I do tell guys to be careful when dating single moms. I never said that they can't ever in no situation marry a single mom, but there's a lot of hard questions you need to ask it's not the same thing as marrying someone that's never been married and doesn't have kids. There's multiple complicated factors. So what happens is that Christians have never thought this issue through, not deeply for the most part. They have just absorbed the feminism, which is in the water, which is in the media, which is everywhere. And so you'll have people that claim to be patriarchal. They're deeply critical of me, and they don't really know what to do. They don't like what I say, but they can't really prove it wrong because it would undermine their entire system of thought. Yeah. Because I'm plain. I'm boringly normal Christianity. If you just go back just a couple, like just a century even, but especially if you go back to the 1600s in the thinking, I don't have anything original to say. You think I'm based. Those guys are next level, right? So these women have never thought of it. I think also many of them have married weak men. They've married guys that are fairly passive. They're all right guys that, you know, they work 40 hours a week or whatever. If you're doing like Vox Days sort of thing, they're like the Delta guy to some degree. But they're not really aggressive leaders. And the women a lot of times are more the leaders in the household. But they claim to be patriarchal. They got all these kids. They homeschool. They go to Christian school.
It's a facade, though. Like Amy Coney Barrett, the Supreme Court justice, she seems like that from a distance, like hardcore Christian. But then it's like you seem to be very assertive as a woman. Like, are you really not wearing the pants in this family? I'm skeptical from that observational standpoint.
For sure, and you saw the exact same thing. And what was McCain's political candidate? I forget her name, the Alaskan.
Oh, it's Sarah Palin.
Yeah, Sarah Palin, same spiel. You know, and you see the chaos in their children and all that. And so I think some of it's a resentment being married to a guy that maybe is not the guy they hope he would be, or they have to tell themselves. There's a lot of different factors playing here. The biggest one is just people don't know what you're talking about. That the church hasn't been teaching them sexuality. You know, when people tell me what I believe, I'm like, I don't believe that. Well, I thought you're patriarchal. And I was like, well, what does patriarchal mean? You know, you define it. You seem to know, because if you had read my book or you've followed me for a long time, you know I don't fall into your clean little mold that you have for this. I believe that men are called to be the leaders. The world is our responsibility. Now, when I say responsibility, you know, all the Rolobots, you know, kind of use, see, blaming men. I'm not saying that everything is man's fault as if he is the cause, but it is our responsibility to deal with it. And so if something goes wrong in your household, it's your responsibility, right? And it's the same thing with anyone in an organization. If something goes wrong in your organization and you're the top of the organization, it's your job to take care of it. So what part of the narrative I see in some red pill circles that I struggle with is that women are inferior to men, and women took the power from men. Now look, help me link that up here, right? Like how exactly did the feminine imperative happen without men handing it over at some level? If men are that much superior and that much stronger and all that stuff, and women are that much inferior, exactly how this happened? Well, I think what happens is there's good patriarchy and there's bad patriarchy. We know guys that are like the patriarch of the group, but they're more like a cult leader. They're more like a guru, and they manipulate men and women for their own good. And I think that's what we've had. We've had evil patriarchs, and that's what we have in these tyrannical political leaders that reduce our rights, and they consolidate it into a few men that they can control. And that's what, when we talk about patriarchy, like there is a type of patriarchy. I mean to smash. I mean to destroy it. But patriarchy itself isn't bad, right? Patriarchy is natural. Just like sex itself isn't bad, but there's types of sex that is bad and destructive. And so Christians have not thought about this. They get triggered real easy. They're still listening to more or less like Oprah Winfrey sort of content with a thin veneer of Christianity painted over it. And people, and they just don't know. They don't know how bad things are. Some of these people are like in their late 40s and 50s and 60s. They know that women sleep around. They know that, but they don't know that they sleep around like they do now, right? Yeah. They don't realize that not only do they have an Instagram account, but they got a burner account too, right? Yeah. They have an account where they post their stuff that they really want people to see, and they post other stuff for mom and dad to find, or sister.
They're still living in the 90s basically. That's their model of like what the dating marketplace is like. I feel that talking to boomers and older Gen Xers.
And it comes up. It's a generational divide. And what I've realized, because my goal is to take it down, to take down the corruption. And the boomers have money and power. And part of the work we have to do is try to help some of them see the light. And you can see Pastor Doug Wilson, who's in my denomination, a man who I deeply respect. Doug Wilson used to say some boomerish things. But man, I got to tell you, the content he's been putting out the last year, he's dialed in. He wrote a book on how to get a girl, and it's pretty red pill, man. In other words, he's thinking this stuff through. So I do think there's guys out there that are realizing like, whoa, this is actually, young men are being hurt. This is a bad situation. We got to speak to it. So I'm really encouraged to see that happen. We have to reach those people if we're going to do something, you know? So there's some thoughts. I'll hand the mic off to the man with the beard there.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I got a question for you. Based on what Michael's saying, he's talking about patriarchy is leadership and masculinity. God calls on men to lead their families, their culture, all that. Do you think that leadership makes women miserable? And in terms of it being an unnatural role in the context of what Michael said?
Yeah, and I do think that this gets to a lot of the issue with some of your original question about is there a large anti-patriarchy movement in Christianity? And I think what you see is that R.L. Dabney, a theologian over 100 years ago, he said that this kind of reactionary conservatism that is basically just always responding to the progressive, liberal, aggressive agenda is basically like the shadow that follows radicalism to perdition, is what he called it. So you see this playing out in both the secular conservative world. You see it playing out in church politics and church teaching, where there's a group of people, the progressive radical left, that have a totalizing agenda where they are aiming to teach human beings how to be human beings in every aspect of what it means to be human. They're saying, this is what you should think about gender and sexuality. This is what you should think about politics and money. This is what you should think about nutrition and diet. This is, all the way down the line.
Morality, all
morality,
philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah. And their goal is to say, here's what a human being is and is for. Here is the fundamental nature of reality and how to live in harmony at peace with it. And they have no intent of carving out a neutral space where they would say something like, you do your thing over there if you disagree with me, and we'll do our thing over here. They want to win the world, right? They want to win everybody to their view. And so what you see is this kind of, I would call it like a cuckolded conservatism, or a soft conservatism that is the shadow that follows radicalism to perdition, in the sense that it's always trying to say, let me cling to some vestigial part of my worldview.
A facade
I'll cede you most of the key battleground. And so in the church, you see this with something like complementarianism and a lot of the current teaching around anthropology and sexuality and the household and men and women and children and all of that, where they'll say things like, well, men and women fundamentally are the same in their nature in every way. And then, sure, in the Bible, there are a few places where God says, and yet, men are to be pastors and women are not to be pastors. They're trying to cling to that doctrine. But at the same time, they're holding that out with their right hand, and with their left hand, they're denying that any kind of in nature, in the creational foundations of manhood and womanhood, femaleness and maleness, this real distinction that shows up even in a book like Why Men Rule, where he's anthropologically demonstrating the natural differences, the in nature differences of maleness and femaleness, that actually mean, when translated into almost every corner of human existence, that if you try to put femaleness into a position that it was not designed to be put into, like leadership, civic leadership, home leadership, political leadership, ecclesial leadership in the church, then what you will be doing is you'll be asking a fish to go walk the dog. It's just, it over time, because it doesn't work on the level of God's created design, well, then you're going to actually end up harming both society, everything being led by that woman, and you're going to harm the woman herself.
So it's super dysfunctional, basically.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think against this totalizing agenda of what I would call the demonic, secular, ascendant, woke left religion, this kind of cuckolded conservatism has been attempting to have no fight, to not fight the fundamental battle of totalizing worldview with one hand, and kind of cling with the other hand to a few vestiges of doctrine. And that really is it's just a shadow. The further progressivism goes, the shadow's going to follow. It's going to be 3 steps behind, but ultimately it's going to land in this creation denying perdition, where men and women are trying to be something that God the Father did not make them to be. And so they will ultimately land in the world of self-destruction.
They're going to pay for it in pain and suffering.
Yeah. The Proverbs say those who hate wisdom love death. So that's the principle.
Yeah.
If you hate wisdom, whether you like it or not, what's going to happen is that thoroughgoingly throughout everything you do, you're going to embrace death as your mistress and your lover, and you're just going to be making love to death. I mean, that's what you do. So I think Michael and I, one of the reasons that we're aligned on a lot of this stuff is because what we're trying to do is return again to this 15th, 16th century boringly old Christianity that says creation has a givenness because it has a creator who made it a certain way, and he fitted each part of his creation for those things which he purposed for it to do. And so if you try to deny that functionally anywhere, what you're going to end up doing is receiving the fruit of death somewhere down the line in an increasing way.
Which is why patriarchy is inevitable.
Right.
You can have like I always ask people, what if all society was gay, right? How long would society last?
Right.
One generation, right? Let's say like they no heterosexual sex at all. It'd be one generation. And when you try to overturn God's design, you can get away with it for a while. A great example would be our economic systems in America, right? Our economic systems are broken and make no sense. And the reason we've been able to get away,
I love this.
I dislike this picture for so many reasons. But anyway,
I love it. I love it. Hey, woman.
But we've been able to get away with a broken economic system for a series of compromises down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But when finally it breaks, it's going to break massively. And so I think a lot of libertarians have underestimated how long the system can work, right? They've been expecting things to collapse. Peter Schiff's been saying it forever, like the 90s, right? But they're not wrong that it's broken. And there is going to be some sort of catastrophe at some point. I think a lot of times we underestimate, or as George Bush would say, misunderestimate how long these things can be go broken. So we're in a broken culture, and there's going to be a time where it breaks down. Part of the problems where I differ with MGTOW and some of the Black Pill guys is they think that men can just kind of pull out of society and it's going to like collapse all at once, and then they'll re-enter in and reestablish things. No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they underestimate the number of blue pill men, or whatever you want to call them, that will go along with this. They underestimate how long things will take to break down. I think that, and I also think that's kind of passive. And again, like, we've interacted with these people and we've seen what's happened to their lives and the things they've gone through. They're not exactly as the culture would depict them, as these, basement dwelling trolls. A lot of them are successful professionals that really went through some terrible things in a marriage that fell apart, got thrown under the bus by the courts, often by the church, whatever. But I think we don't realize how long this stuff can drag on. And if you have the confidence I do, that patriarchy is inevitable, it's a part of nature. It's a natural, like it was Cicero that says, custom never defeats nature.
That's right.
And so nature is inevitable. So why go against the grain of nature? And that's what you're doing if you're backing out. I say go with it and take it. And I think the win is in our sails. It just means you have to fight, and it's aggressive and it's messy. And it means you get hate mail, and it means that people say you beat your wife. It means that you go, it means all the stuff that anyone in this space does. It means you're going to suffer for it. It means that you have to be willing to make allies and co-belligerents that, people are going to, guilt by association is intense in our culture, and it works on some people. Right? Like, I don't care. Like, Jesus associated with terrible people. Paul was too, and I'm really careful how I do things. But
yeah, Brian did a whole tweet thread on this exact topic, recently about me and 21 and Patriarch and stuff, and the Manosphere, I guess. Yeah. And
so that's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to take. We're going to have to be willing to suffer and push through. But victory is not that far off as people think it is. People are recognizing the insanity of this. Like, what people don't know about the 21 Summit is there are always a few characters that have some things to say that I think a lot of people roll their eyes at, not just me or Christians. And you create more or less TED Talks for Men. It's a forum. The whole premise of it isn't that everyone agrees, but everyone's talking about a subject. They're anti-feminist and they're pro-male, more or less.
Yes.
And so it's a forum by nature. It's a place for multiple perspectives to interact. It's not, no one there fully endorses anyone, or even mostly endorses anyone. Like Tanner and I both know each other are going to hell, except I'm right. And Tanner and I have talked about it, and we tease each other about it through text and stuff. But just as I could work with a Mormon at my vocational job, I could sit on stage and have a conversation and be civil. My goodness, man. So
well, you share common values and serious concerns about the country you live in, that things could fall apart into all kinds of catastrophes.
And
that masculinity is good.
Yeah, and people act like we live in a Christian nation or something. This is a nation that's multicultural too, and that's part of the problem. But what I was going to say is that they don't realize how positive 21 has gotten, 21 Summit. Like when you go there, it's very positive, and people are really talking about like how to do things, how to fix things, how to build things, how to put their life back together, how to build something positive. People are very open to hearing about the spiritual nature or side of masculinity. They want to talk about it. They come to me, they seek me out, you know, and I can, and the conversations are mature, relaxed conversations. I just think me and Arthur Kwan Lee and Alex Cortez and Tanner and a few other guys in a room with a bunch of the attendees just listening to us go back and forth over philosophy and stuff. It was an awesome conversation. And that's what's happening, because men are looking for a forum to talk about these things where they're not going to get canceled. We're not going to be hated. We're not going to be screamed at. And so to me, it's like, whatever. I got to deal with some people making nasty memes of me online and telling me I'm a terrible person. Whatever. I still go home to Emily every night. I still have 7 kids. I still have close friends. They can tell me who they think I am. But at the end of the day, I'm still me. You know? So,
and this is a great point too about the number one, Christianity ought not be scared of having conversations out in the open. If we believe that it's true, and we do, then we believe that it's true everywhere it goes and about everything it says. And that means that we're not scared of going into the modern day Areopagus, like Paul in Acts 17, talking with the Stoic and Epicurean philosophers with whom he completely disagreed about reality, to bring his message there.
And who had sex with little boys. Can we not forget this?
They weren't minor differences, and these weren't Christians morally. They, you know, and even this, I think, even demonstrates some of the feminization of the conversation. You know, where you say we have even, you know, women of both sexes, or whatever the phrase is, not wanting men to go and have these conversations in environments that aren't completely controlled and sanitized by a Christian morality from top to bottom. And I would say that if you're doing that, you're functioning in a way that puts agreeableness, you know, that puts unity building above things like conflict in search of what is actually true.
Conflict resolution.
Yeah. The only way you can do that is by actually taking a claim and a counterclaim and make them go to war in front of everybody, nobody editing anything, nobody photoshopping or putting a plastic veneer over it. And, you know, because we're Christians, we're not scared of doing that. I'm not scared that I'm going to get cooties from some, you know, differing worldview on me just because I'm in the same room with it. It's like, is what I'm saying true or is it not? And if it's true, then it shouldn't be scared of coming into the light.
So this brings me to my next question I want to ask both of you guys, particularly Brian, but also Michael to an extent. Michael, because he's been around longer, basically. But what has been your observation and reception to the Manosphere, like how you've been accepted? Brian, you haven't been to a Manosphere live event yet, but you will in a few months. You've seen it online, though, I'm sure, and observed what I tweet, what Michael tweets, many others. I mean, a lot of people have reached out to me and said that it's a strange comment for me to get, but they say that I'm more Christian than a lot of Christians I know because of my fierce advocacy of masculinity and of family and of fatherhood and femininity, masculine men, feminine women, stuff like that. What do you guys observe? I mean, some people even say, I think Brian said it in his Twitter thread, that you see the work of God in the Manosphere and your own vision and understanding of it. So what has been your observation of the Manosphere as a kind of a decentralized movement? And what's been your own personal reception to it as you've gotten a little bit closer to it and created content in a way, especially Michael, who's pretty popular and hops on a lot of live streams and stuff. Either one of you go first.
Sure. The reception, I think, is always surprisingly good, because I think a lot of the even non-Christians who come across Michael's content or my content or Pastor Doug Wilson's content, they recognize the ring of, well, whatever these guys believe fundamentally, it seems like what they're saying is with the grain of reality. It seems like they're identifying actual problems that we really see as well, and that they're not peripheral problems, right? That some of the things we're talking about are they really are getting to the center of where societally things are going wrong. And so they're not these meaningless conversations about how many angels can dance on the head of the pin. They're real questions with actual implications for everybody, no matter what. And I think part of it as well just has to do with the nature of sort of uncensored maleness, that it certainly can go very wrong and can become very destructive. Unrestrained maleness can destroy worlds. But when you actually take off the restraints from maleness as well, you see the glories of maleness in the same vision as well. You can see the glories of, courage and conquest and strength and self-sacrifice and care about the truth over consensus. And, a lot of those things I think are attractive to human beings because human beings are made in the image of God, who is the God who creates reality that's not relativist goo. It actually has edges and shape to it. And so I think some of those things are at play. I'd be curious to hear what Michael has to say as well, since he has much more experience in the trenches of the manosphere than I do.
Yeah, it's wild.
I guess what I would say is, for the most part, it's been a warm reception for the most part. There are some contingents that, anyone that is pro-marriage, which I am, and they take great offense to that because they think that's signing men up more or less for a life of imprisonment. I think there's some that are really strongly, they want the manosphere to be a-religious, so not have any religious elements in it. But I think everything's naturally religious and spiritual, and it's unavoidable. But nonetheless, so there's some of that negativity that you get. But for the most part, I think men respect men that are men of integrity, that shoot them straight, and don't talk down to them. And I find it pretty easy to build relationships with other men. And I think it's basic stuff. So I've had a really good time. I've become friends with a lot of guys, and we keep up and we talk, and we have some really we disagree, and that's that. We disagree, and I'll lay it out. And Tony Bruno, when I come on his live stream, sometimes he always has closing thoughts. I always just tell people to repent and believe the gospel. I just tell them the same thing every time, and I mean it too. And I think it's funny when I'm on Tony's stream, people they seem always surprised that I'm willing to listen to them, which I think is a bad sign. That there's this assumption that people are just not going to listen to you. And I know what I believe is true. And I'm not in a rush to defend myself and in a rush to defend it. I'm willing to talk to someone.
You're secure in your beliefs is what I've observed of you over the years.
And I want to hear what they have to say. I don't know what they're going to say. Everyone's always assuming everything. Give them a moment.
Yeah.
You can tell when someone's a young punk and needs to be put in his place. But a lot of the guys on that stream aren't like that. A lot of those guys really just have real questions. And so I find if you come that way with anyone, this is part of the problem with a lot of the people they're very critical of what I have to say, and anyone like me, is that they don't even listen. Like, they put words in your own mouth. They're condescending. They're rude and nasty. And you're like, I don't want to be anything like you. And
they make wild accusations that you abuse your wife and all kinds of criminal, nasty stuff.
They do, and they've threatened my life.
Yep.
Yeah, we have to be circumspect about my address and things like that. And we had this guy rush Kavanaugh because of abortion and Roe v. Wade. And some of these people are very deranged, and they don't understand how much harm that, and people try to pull my kids into it. My wife every once in a while has been on a stream with me just because she happens to be in the room or something. But that's not really her thing, and certainly not my kids' thing. And these people are willing to pull all that in. The manosphere generally, as long as we kind of keep it to combatants. If someone inserts himself into the combat, then they're a combatant then. But generally, it's kept that way because it's more of a conversation, an argument, whatever. So for me, it's been positive. I've seen more than a few people come to my church because of the Red Man Group or me at 21, I've been
Wow.
able to minister to some of the people who have since converted to Christianity and help them find good churches to plug them into. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak the truth, to interact with ideas. Like to take Christianity out for a spin in the public domain. It's fun, run over some people.
Yeah. So this is two of the main reasons I love working with you, Michael, and to an extent Brian now, who's a bit newer. Both of you are aggressively and fully in favor of living in alignment to reality and to nature. And you believe that certain God and stuff made this reality and this nature. We differ there, but I don't really care, because you're so aggressively in favor of the world, the observable world around you, and that to live in alignment to it in a common sense fashion is really healthy and good and natural and positive. And to disobey that is going to have inevitable consequences: pain, misery, suffering, all kinds of stuff. I was telling Michael the other day that the 7 deadly sins are very interesting to me, because in a way it's like these sins, you live in a way like a hell on earth. Gluttony, being obese, being on a scooter at 40 years old and eating fried chicken at Walmart. I mean, this is this is disgusting. This is a hellish way to live, even if it's not a literal hellscape. It's like, I can't even imagine living like that. But this is what people do with gluttony, with lust, all kinds of stuff. And it's amazing to see. There's another point too I wanted to make with that. Dang it was a follow up to that. But anyway, I love it. I love working with you guys on these issues. And yeah, people need this kind of information, man. I'm glad. Oh, this is what I wanted to ask you too. Next, I'll think of the second point in a little bit. But do you find that the Manosphere is more welcoming to these issues than other Christian, like generalized Christianity in America? And even, I know, Michael, you've said Christian conferences, for example, they try to limit your speech at like a live event. They try to dictate to you what you're going to say and not say.
That has happened until recently. Yeah. The last couple of years, not
Wow.
anymore, because they kind of know what they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as I said, the first time I spoke at the event, I used to do a lot of youth speaking back in the day. And I was invited to come to a youth conference and speak, and everything seemed fine. And the guy gave me a list of issues I wasn't allowed to talk about. And I said, "What's this?" He's like, "You're not allowed to talk about these things." And I was like, well, since when? Why are you telling me this now? Well, we just think they're sensitive issues. Like, not talk about hell, sexuality, that sort of thing. And I had none of those were any topics that I planned to talk about. But I brought the list with me up there, and I immediately talked about all of them. And Emily looked at me, and she knew exactly what I was going to do. And I was just like, no way, man. Like, people don't tell me what I get to talk about when I'm preaching from the Word of God. That's my decision, and you don't want. You shouldn't invite me. You shouldn't invite me, because I'm just going to do what I think's right. And and that's that. And well, then we're not going to invite you back. It's like the Jim Morrison in The Doors. They told him not to play "Come On Baby, Light My Fire" on the Ed, what's his name? That famous talk show before Carson back in the day, Ed Sullivan show. So they play it anyway. And Ed Sullivan says, "You'll never play the Ed Sullivan show again." He's like, "We just played it, man." That's kind of how I feel. It was like, whatever, I just did it. And so I think nowadays, though, there is a hunger for this content more and more, because people are seeing the cost that it's, to your point on gluttony and the 7 deadly sins and the temporal consequences of it. People are seeing that. And my church has a lot of people that I probably would have called normies years ago that would not have had patience for me. And those are the same people like pushing me to take more risk, where I've become, I like to bring people along, and I don't want to scare them away. I'm fine to differ, but I'd like them to leave because we disagree, not because there's a misunderstanding. These days you're like, go harder, man. It's crazy. And so I think people are fed up and they're listening. So the church is coming around, but the guys that are in the Manosphere already have had that sort of, they might not be fully living in the new reality, but they are starting to unplug, and they're realizing things are not what they were told. Hence the whole Matrix.
They're further from the mainstream. That's what I've observed about the Manosphere, just thinking about it and being in it for some 15, 16 years. It doesn't exist within the control of mainstream culture, feminism, government organizations, thought police, PC culture. For the most part, that stuff is like very minimal in the manosphere. And it's one of the few movements around where I think that really is the main thrust of it, is a rejection of all the stuff, the trans stuff, the homo stuff, the communism, the socialism, the feminism, the wokeism. Like, it's this large scale rejection of really irrational ways of living. That's what's reminded me, by the way, of my second point I wanted to make, is that both of you, and I think Doug Wilson would be in there too, but you guys are super in favor of the truth, and you fight for the truth conceptually. Even if we disagree on what some of these specifics are, you're in favor of the truth 100% in a world that thinks it's post-truth, right? And there is no truth, and raw truth. And what's your truth, bro? And my truth, and personal truth, like all this, all this relativistic crap. Both of you are like super anti-relativist. You're like, there's reality, God made it, this is the Bible, this is the book, this is what happened, this is Adam, this is Eve, and I love being around that, because I hate the wishy-washy flip-floppiness of so much of culture right now. I guess there maybe is a silent, chunk or majority or whatever it is that also doesn't like that, but they don't speak up enough, and you guys do. You get mainstream heat, you get death threats, and yet you keep pushing, and I love that.
And those are the places where you discover what the actual issues are, and where the truth needs to be preserved in any given time. And those are going to be different parts on the wall at different times. There was a biographer of Martin Luther, one of the reformers, Protestant Reformation, and he basically said, to paraphrase, it's at the point of attack that the courage of the soldier is tested, right? It's not like, can you defend the walls of Christian orthodoxy and truth, everywhere they're not attacking? Can you defend the doctrine of supralapsarianism or infralapsarianism while, over here we've got a bunch of basically all in progressive demonic agenda saying, well, we're going to actually say that a man isn't a man, a woman isn't a woman, sex isn't, and deny all of these key doctrines of anthropology and deny reality there. That's where you have to go, and you have to figure out whether you have the stones to say the truth into the hostility of opposition, or if you're just going to say comfortable truths over here on the off stage where the debate's not really happening. And again, I just think that's where you have a lot of cowardice that is revealed, and it also gives opportunities for guys like Michael and me who do just say boringly Christian things to just continue saying those boringly Christian things in exactly the place where that will cause mobs to develop.
Well, yeah, because it's only boring 500 years ago or 100 years ago. These days, it's all like sanitized Christianity, which I think is a basic reason why you two stand out and you guys get heat on you from not only mainstream media sometimes, but all these Christian feminists and anti-patriarchy Christians. And like Michael, you told me about a Christian, I don't want to dox his name or anything, but you said he got kicked out of his church for being openly pro-patriarchy. And
I know a lot of those. Yeah, I know a lot of those.
Wow.
Now, there are a lot of strategic missteps guys make, but that's what you do when you're alone. A lot of times you kind of overreact. And that's another thing why having a signal boost like Red Men Group, 21 so helpful. I always tell people I use social media. What people don't understand about my social media following is I'm okay with losing it. Like that's what they don't get. Someone was like this guy had like 500 followers and he was like telling me how to build a following. And I was like, so you get like other account or something? He's like, you keep this up, you're going to lose followers. I'm like, so what? So what? Yeah. Like, I'm fine with that. I'm just riding this wave, man. But my whole goal when I got involved in Twitter, I told, this is literally what I told I'll have to send this to you. I told my elders a couple of years ago at my former church that I'm pretty sure I can get into the Manosphere and I'm going to use Twitter to do it, even though that Twitter's pretty gay. That was like in my report. I can show you that. And that was about 7 months before George connected me with you. But to the point, like I want people to know they're not alone, that their thoughts aren't crazy. And a lot of these guys, if they weren't isolated and just had someone that was reasonably minded, like, yeah, that's bad, that's terrible, but you don't have control of that, but you do have control of yourself. You can, someone that was just in their corner, calm them down and aim them, well, then we can actually get more done, be more productive, and not have these people get caught up in I don't want to say, I don't like the word extremism because it's so politically pregnant with manipulation. I don't want to see them get into something that's super unbalanced and destructive to them. And we've seen like some nut jobs like that run through, like the what's his name that shot those people up in Colorado. We all like were like,
Roman,
Roman. Everyone that interacted with him, like he's got some interesting insights and he's a character. But he gave everyone the heebie-jeebies, man, even you. And so when he ended up going the direction he did, it was probably because he was isolated and he had his own mental issues. I think things like Red Man Group and 21, like pointing people towards more constructive stuff. Like you've had a lot of people on here that even though I disagree with their worldview, they're certainly not telling men to go up and shoot up stuff, but trying to show them how to build a life that's more productive and not destructive. So having this signal boost to say to other Christians out there in this world, you're not crazy. Here's some things to think about. Here's how to build. Here's where to go. Here's where to look to. I think that's helpful. And I'm taking full advantage of it as long as it fits with my other life goals. You know what I mean? And this has been a good ride.
So it brings me to the next question I want to ask both of you. And it's something that I really don't know, so I want to ask. But a lot of people I think are not, I don't see it talked about enough. How important in Christianity and both of your own understandings of it, obviously there's a lot of different denominations and you guys, the denominational politics and infighting have been of increasing interest to me over the past couple of years. But how important are issues like masculinity and femininity to Christianity? Because you hear all the talk about family, at least in better wings of it, right? Not just super banal stuff, but they talk about like family values and this and that. But what about masculinity and femininity? Because I grew up learning, I was raised as a Catholic. There was no discussion of like patriarchy, masculinity, femininity, none of this stuff. And yet you both present, these are like really important issues to both of you. So how important is it like officially? Because I don't think the average Christian even seems to be remotely aware of this.
Yeah, I mean, to answer that question, you really have to understand the fundamental issues that we're all going to need to answer in some way and how we view and live in the world. Questions like, what is a person? What is a human being? What is the nature of this reality that we live in? Who made it? Did anybody make it? Where did it come from? And when you start asking those questions, you realize that how doctrinally center a question like what is a man and what is a woman is. If you don't understand that, then you have a hard time understanding Christianity at all, right? Because those questions do live at the center of the doctrine of creation, of anthropology. You know, when you start to look at the Christian answers to those questions, you come to this realization that if you start denying maleness and femaleness and masculinity and these sexed realities in the world, you'll have a hard time affirming the doctrine of Scripture that the Bible is true. You'll have a hard time affirming the doctrine of creation, that God made all things. The Bible is completely 100% frank and says, no, all things were made by God, and specifically by God, who is a father, the Father of lights, from whom comes down every good and perfect gift. And that, through sin, man corrupted everything, brought corruption into every corner of creation. Every part of what it means to be human is being infected by sin. That humanity and humanness isn't a bad thing, but that it's been infected and corrupted by sin. And so the only way that you're going to be able to even figure out how to live in the world that we live in is by understanding, what are you even aiming at? Right? What is success? What is a human being supposed to be? What is a man supposed to be? What is a woman supposed to be? And what at the center of the Christian faith is the gospel of the kingdom of God, is the good news that because of the work of Christ in clearing our debt, we can begin to actually live an authentic human life again, which looks like being conformed by grace and through faith into the image for which God created man in the first place. So to answer your question, it's really central. I mean, you can't actually be sanctified, this process of being conformed to the image of Christ. You can't become more holy unless you understand what a holy man looks like anyway, and what a holy woman looks like. If you give the wrong answer to those questions, you'll be like a guy who has the wrong map coordinates plugged into his iPhone and expects to still get to the right destination. It's like, you're just not going to get there. You have to understand these questions if you're going to actually live a fruitful human life in the first place.
And
Michael?
Yeah, but I would say it's essential to understand the gospel. So Adam is our first father. He abdicates his role as a leader and listens to the voice of his wife when she says, "Here, eat this fruit." So Eve was deceived. Adam wasn't deceived. Adam went along with it. He knew he shouldn't, and he went along with his wife. And in the curse,
beta, man.
in the curse, God says, "Because you've listened to the voice of your own wife, I'm doing this." But Adam also rebelled against God the Father. God had provided all for them and said, "This one thing don't do," and they did that one thing, and he did it. And so the fall is one way you can understand it as a man's dereliction of duty and rebellion of fatherhood of the heavenly patriarch of patriarchy. And so then there's a promise given that through a son, the devil, who himself is a father of a sort, father of lies, the devil will be crushed. That passes down the patriarchal line. That's why we trace Christianity patriarchally. We look at the different fathers and whatever, because somewhere a son, a savior is coming. Jesus had to be male. Jesus couldn't be a daughter. Like, he's a king, he's a patriarch, he's making things right. He's the second Adam to correct everything. So not only is the fall essential, or sexuality is essential to the fall, to the redemption, it is as well, where Christ makes us right with the Father. And so part of the benefit of being saved, of being washed in the blood of Christ, being reconciled, is now God is our Father again. Everyone's God's creation, but in terms of a relationship, not everyone has God as their father. Not all a son of God, and that happens through Christ. So you reject sexuality, you reject the entire message of Christianity. Like male leadership is the consistent pattern throughout. Jesus picks 12 men. When they're going to pick other apostles, it has to be men. If you're going to have elders in the church, they have to be a husband of one wife. They have to be a man. Same with deacons, prophets. Were men, when they held an office, were there people that spoke forth the word of God in some way that weren't men? There are a few occasions but it's not normative at all. It's not a pattern. And you have to look at those things in the proper context. Even when Deborah she's made a judge of Israel, she's made the judge of Israel because there wasn't a man that would step up. And the purpose of it was to shame Israel. Was to say, well, I got to put this woman, and Deborah wasn't proud of it, but she served with a sort of sadness, And so everything about Christianity is patriarchal in that sense. Everything about existence is sexual, not erotically sexual, but in that we have a sex, we have a ontological, biological reality that's sexed. I am a male. As a man, I never stopped being male in this life. My experiences, my emotions, my hormones, my design. Some women are really scared to walk on a city block, right? They cross to the other side of the street. I don't. I'm 6'1". I'm a big dude. They cross to the other side. I'm not scared. I'm a man, right? She's a woman. Our whole existence is different. The way, if I get in a fight with a guy, that does not mean the end of our relationship. That actually might be the start of a relationship for a man. For a woman, that might mean the end of a relationship and a grudge that will be held throughout life. Our entire experience is colored by our sexuality. To deny it is to be foolish. To say, though, that there is a basic equality between men and women and that we're equally human. But there is a distinction. So the problem is that feminists say equality, but what they really mean is sameness. And men and women are not the same. They're different, and different is good.
In my understanding, I've thought about this philosophically for 5 or 6 years now. The most fundamental thing to being a human is being human itself, but the second most fundamental thing is male or female. And that seems to be very similar to what you're saying here, that the only thing more fundamental than being a man or a woman is just being human. And in that sense, we share a humanness and equality. I'm afraid to use the word equality because it's so loaded, pregnant with propaganda, but there is an equality. And even in Christianity, men and women are equal before God, right?
Absolutely. That's Galatians 3:28, that neither male nor female. So people will say, therefore, sex is obliterated. I'm like, do you still have a penis? Yeah, you do. It means it doesn't matter before Christ in some way. Now, what is that way? Well, it's that we have equal access to God through the cross. And I've been thinking about this a whole lot as we recover patriarchy. we also have to, in masculinity, we have to recover femininity, which is really tricky. I think men are more hated actively than women, but I really do think women have been more lied to. And that's just kind of like a truism, it's that I'm saying here. But to wake women up to this means seeing that people have really done them wrong in some major ways. And that's why, like, you say, hey, you shouldn't be posting those pictures on Instagram like that, or you should be careful about marrying single mothers. You say that and things explode because these women, everyone's told them, no, what you're doing is great. And no, there's no consequences. And then someone says, actually, there are real long-term consequences and real loss from these decisions. They've never heard that before.
Right.
I remember this episode of the Andy Griffith Show where Opie's playing this kid in chess, and he keeps letting the kid win in chess so he'll be his friend. And the kid sucks at chess. And then someone finally, like Andy says, look, you can't let him win. You're deceiving him, Opie. Next time, just play for real. And Opie destroys him. And the kid like throws a fit, like, he's a bad loser and all this. And that's kind of what's been going on is we've been propping up a bunch of lies. And now when people are starting to make real demands and raise standards, these people are freaking out. And so we have to recover femininity as well. That's why at 22, I was telling these women, I was telling these women last year just that, I know some of you have made some major mistakes and done things that you shouldn't have done, but, we have to rebuild with what we have. And I always think about those shows where they reclaim old wood or something. And you can make beautiful things with broken things. And guys out there that have had some terrible divorces or made some huge mistakes, or women, like we have to rebuild where we're at. And that means reclaiming femininity. And I don't want my wife is like gun-ho on chickens and bees, and she draws and educates my kids. And I hate chickens. I can't stand it. And I can't wait to kill half of them tomorrow when we butcher them. I mean, I'm kind of like not looking forward to it, but I am at the same time, so I don't have to deal with them anymore. But she brings things to my relationship that I can't bring. I don't need someone that just cleans up after me. I clean up after myself. I'm a man. And I could cook for myself if I wanted to, but my wife enjoys it. She does a good job. And but she brings all these other things that are advantageous. And so patriarchy creates the space for women to be feminine again. It creates a safe space where you say, you know what? You don't have to go out there and compete with men. I'll take care of it. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't you know what? When we walk down the street, I'll walk with you, right? You don't have to cross to the other side. It'll be all right. You can just be a girl. You can be a girl. Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow's little thing where she runs and wraps her legs around their heads and throws them to the ground. That doesn't work in real life. The guy would just body slam her and kill her. All this stuff that we see being pushed, this women warrior stuff, is nonsense. Not only do women have to be mothers and wives and careerists, now they also have to be warriors. And the culture is like piling on lies onto women, and they're having nervous breakdowns and using tons of prescription medicine and tons of alcohol and losing their freaking minds. Patriarchy will stop that from happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to close up. We got about 5 minutes left on basically something you mentioned a few minutes ago. So I want to follow up on it, and I want to ask both of you. So are Christian female pastors and the women who are that, want to become that, work towards that, the ones who actually, there are some who, I've met one in real life. There was one in Orlando at a local Republican event, and I thought it was pretty cringe, but anyway, she was there. Jesse Lee Peterson was there too, and he was just like, you could tell he was like seething because he really doesn't like the female pastors either. Are those female Christian pastors living in sin actively? Like, can they go to hell for that? Is it that bad? Yeah.
Well, they're rejecting the word of God, and what you find with those pastors is that there's usually other essential doctrines that they reject as well. Okay. Usually hell. The exclusivity of Christianity, we say, no, Mormons are going to hell. No, Buddhists are going to hell. That to a woman's like, oh, I want to be nice and include them. A lot of them. And so it's pretty rare that it's a standalone deviation from Scripture.
Yeah, you see that, even think of some of the reasons why. I mean, pastors are charged with defending the sheep, defending the flock against wolves. So if you're saying that you're going to set up a woman pastor, you should also, in principle, have no problem when, the wolves come, or when an intruder comes into your house saying, "Okay, honey, here's the gun. Go take care of them. I'll hide under the bed." Right? It's the same thing. Pastors deal with, continue in our church in the last year. There have been at least 5 or 6 scenarios where the male pastorate, myself and the other pastors and elders, have to go tell somebody that he needs to repent of some serious sin, or we are kicking him out of the church. And the security at the door will be saying, "No, you may not come back in. You are not a Christian. This is just basic church discipline." And so if you then put a woman into that role, you're asking her to do 15 things before breakfast that she's not ontologically or in her nature equipped to do. And you're setting up a system where you are guaranteeing a cowardice, you're guaranteeing compromise, you're guaranteeing a church that's going to be taken over by wolves and evil patriarchy, even really sneaky evil patriarchy. So yeah, I mean, in the sense that if you willfully continue, this is one of the core, again, boringly orthodox doctrines of Christianity, that if you willfully continue in serious unrepentant sin, then you're not a Christian. This is like Paul in 1 Corinthians 6 says, "Don't you know that liars and adulterers and men who practice homosexuality will not inherit the kingdom of God?" And he's not saying that people are saved by their good works, but he's saying that shows that these people are not Christians. They don't submit to the Father. They're not sons.
They're frauds.
Yeah, they're frauds. Yeah. And so certainly you could. I mean, we wouldn't want to set up a doctrine where we would say any one particular instance of any one sin, it means you're going to hell. People go to hell because they are sinners, and they therefore sin in their behavior, and they need repentance and faith in Christ.
But female pastors are doing something that to you guys is pretty obviously out of line with the Word of God. Like, this is not a complex issue, not a gray area. Like, very cut and dry is stupid.
It's like Doug Wilson calls gay marriage gay mirage, like it's a mirage. Yeah. I've had a lesbian Methodist pastor who we actually had lots of good conversations. We worked out at the same YMCA. And we would talk sometimes, but she would always say, "Yeah, I'm a pastor." And I was like, "No, you're not." And she got a kick out of it because she was actually more manly than a lot of guys I know, if I'm going to be honest. But I would just, "No, you're not." And it was like a running joke, kind of. Yeah. But she knew I really meant it. And so they're not pastors. They're not. They can't be. It's like you can't. It's like a cat can't be a dog. Like you can't, it's not within your nature. It's not possible. Can a woman be pastoral, right? Can she have like that sort of shepherd-like care for people? Absolutely. Like we need feminine nature in the church. We need that motherly instinct. We need all that sort of attention to detail that can really matter to women in atmospheres. We need all that stuff.
Would that be like Lori Alexander, the Transformed Wife, the way she talks online to young women?
I think so. And I think Lori, struggles sometimes with having that teaching platform, but she's very clear that she only wants to talk to young women. And she always addresses young women. And when she deals with things that speak more to men, it's usually retweeting something of mine or Brian's or Eric's or someone else's. So I think she's trying. It's hard. Like, what are we to do? There's women, they need good content on how to be a godly woman because they're not being taught in their churches. And so you have some women that'll have podcasts, and some of the patriarchal guys will say, well, women shouldn't be teaching. Okay. All right. I feel ya. But these women are trying to encourage other sisters out there without that. And then they'll say, well, what if men listen? Well, you know what? Is that really their fault that guys are doing that? Like, I've been on, there's a podcast called The Sheologians, and it's two ladies. It's been on, it's very popular, and I've been on it. I've never listened to it my entire life. I've not even listened to my episode. It did pretty well, but it's Sheologians, it's women teaching women. There's nothing wrong with that, and we need more content out there, but we don't need women trying to exercise authority over men and lead the church. They're not equipped to do it, just like they're not equipped for the battlefield. Well, I know this one woman, she killed these people and she did a good job. Like, whatever, it's one example. It's not sustained. And it's not even good a lot of times. Like men, I've been dealing with the death of my brother, and I didn't cry at all the week of. It didn't really register. I did what I needed to do. I dealt with the coroner and the police and all that sort of stuff. And but then a couple weeks down the road, I'm feeling it more now, and that's because men tend to have delayed grief with trauma, which is really helpful in the battlefield. Women tend to experience everything in the now, right? Yeah. They're very emotionally aware. So that's good when you're trying to take care of babies and kids. It can be really bad though when you're trying to keep your nerve under fire. The role of the pastorate is intense. It is intense, and people will come at you, and you have to be the most calm person in the room. You cannot have a failure of nerve when you're as a pastor. And women aren't really equipped to do that over and over again. It starts to wear on them. But not very many pastors do a good job these days.
Right. Yeah, I don't even tell my wife that, we don't bring home, and Michael, you're probably the same. You protect your wife from a lot of these difficult situations in the church where you have to engage in conflict and, go to battle and have people saying wicked, evil lies about you. You don't even bring that to your wife. You come home with a smile on your face. You eat dinner, you play with your kids, you love your wife, you go to bed. She doesn't even know about it because she wasn't made for that. You take the arrows and the shield, you put it down at the door. And, once again, even there is sexual polarity. There is God's good design at work. And I'm not in existential dread day to day. I'm not, about to have a nervous breakdown because someone said a mean thing about me, where I know if my wife knew about some of the things people say about me, she would be gnawing on it all day.
And let me add one thing to this, lest people misunderstand real quick. Women, wives of pastors, can turn into freaking bulldogs, right? So there's a flip side to this. So there's some that it could lead to anxiety and breakdown. But you will find that when your wife finds out people are talking smack about you, giving a hard time, she is ready to go in and destroy those people. Right? Like way more aggressive than you ever would be in a million years. And as men, you have to learn to live in tension.
Yeah.
Right. We just live in tension all the time. And you got to be okay. And that's where we see a lot of younger men failing these days. They don't know how to deal with that. And that's how they're effeminate. And so I find with women is when they're dealing with conflict, like that sort of intense conflict, it can either be, they can shrink down in a way that if a man did it, we'd call them a coward. We don't call women cowards when we do that. We expect them to do that. But the other side is they can actually just get way over the top aggressive. And that's not good either. That destroys an organization. Organization needs level-headed leaders, whether it's the household, the church, or business.
It's like you said, they're living in their emotions in the moment. So if based on that, you could draw the conclusion that they just full force into the emotions. I know you're saying too, my girlfriend's the same way. When she sees people attacking me online, slandering me, lying about me, it can make her really angry and she wants to lash out at them. Sometimes I'll let her, sometimes I'll be like, hey, just chill out. You're a little bit. She's very similar to me, like me with going after people though, which is kind of nice to see. But so to reel back a minute though, so basically you guys are against female pastors 100%, but female to female mentorship, like what Lori does, is good. And I like that a lot too.
Yeah, Titus 2, the whole book of Titus, the Apostle Paul is training basically a bishop, a guy who's going to go establish a bunch of churches on this 100-mile long island called Crete. And he tells them, okay, here's how to teach the young men. Here's how to teach the older men. And to the older women, he says, have the older women teach the younger women to be workers at home, to love their husbands, to love their kids. So Paul's vision for pastors training people in their congregation is to see godly, mature, older women with some miles behind them, taking younger women under their wing and teaching them how to be managers of their household, teach them how to love a husband, teach them how to teach children. And we need, if we recover godly patriarchy, one of the things we will also inevitably recover is godly femininity in the home, in the church, and in society, for sure.
A woman of that, brother. I just been on a kick lately using that. It's been a while. Anyway, it's 3:21, so I want to wrap up. I know you guys had to go, a hard time cut here. Appreciate both of you guys' time today. Everyone, make sure you pick up Michael Foster's book on Amazon. There's a paperback and I believe a hardcover too. It's Good to Be a Man. He co-authored it with Beanon Tennant. I think from New Zealand. Check it out. I got it myself recently. I haven't read too much of it yet, but I have skimmed through it and I will be reading it. Excited to read it. It's a handbook for godly masculinity and written with, I think, enormous mission and purpose. So looking forward to it. Also, make sure you check out Come Meet Myself. Oh, why is that doing that? Oh, there it is. Yeah, come out and meet myself. Many other speakers at 21 Summit this year, including Pastor Michael Foster, myself, Elliot Hulse, Jack Donovan, Richard Grannon, Coach Greg Adams. Brian Foster will be there as well. He'll be speaking at least the Patriarch Convention and the 22 Convention for women. Tickets are buy one, get one free, so you can bring a friend. You can even bring your wife and send her to, or girlfriend, and send her to the 22 Convention, where we will mansplain her and make her great again. So I appreciate both of you guys' time today. Maybe we could do this again sometime. I think it'd be a lot of fun. It's been a really good conversation.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Everyone else, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you probably next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Peace out.